One of baseball's biggest stars was put in danger during what should have been a routine regular season matchup between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Colorado Rockies. What unfolded in the fourth inning of that game was not just a controversial moment. It became one of the most talked about incidents of the 2024 MLB season, raising serious questions about intent, player safety, and the league's responsibility to protect its most valuable athletes. The Dodgers entered the game with Shohei Ohtani locked into the leadoff spot, serving as the designated hitter. As one of the most complete players in the history of the sport, Ohtani's presence at the top of the lineup carries enormous weight. His first two at-bats of the game showed a player engaged and competing hard. In his first plate appearance, he made solid contact, sending a line drive directly to the second baseman, a well-struck ball that simply found a glove. His second at-bat produced a ground ball toward first base, another out, but nothing that suggested any issue with his timing or approach. The Dodgers remained confident in their superstar despite the early results, and the game moved along with a sense of normalcy heading into the fourth inning. That normalcy was about to be shattered. The bottom of the fourth inning set the stage for a high-pressure moment. The Dodgers had runners on second and third base with one out, a situation demanding precision from the pitcher and focus from the batter. Kyle Freeland, the left-handed starter for the Colorado Rockies, was on the mound facing Ohtani in what was already a tense at-bat. The count worked its way to 1 ball and 2 strikes. On the fourth pitch of the at-bat, Freeland attempted a changeup. The ball did not break the way it was intended. It came in far too far inside, and it struck Ohtani directly on the back of his right hand. The sound of the ball making contact was heard throughout the stadium. Ohtani's protective handguard flew off on camera as a result of the force of the impact. The stadium went completely silent for several seconds. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The entire ballpark processed what had just happened to one of the most important players in the sport. For a brief but significant moment, the game stopped being about runs, outs, or standings. It became about the health of Shohei Ohtani. What happened next was something that even veteran baseball observers said they had not seen before. Shohei Ohtani is widely recognized as one of the calmest, most composed players in MLB. He carries himself with a quiet professionalism that rarely cracks, regardless of the situation. Bad calls, big moments, hostile crowds, none of it typically produces a visible emotional response from him. This time was different. After being struck on the hand, Ohtani turned and stared directly at Freeland on the mound. He did not walk it off immediately or jog toward first base. Instead, he slowly stepped forward without breaking eye contact with the pitcher. He was visibly mouthing words in Freeland's direction. It was a controlled but unmistakably pointed response from a player who almost never shows that kind of reaction on a baseball field. Broadcast commentators noted during the game that they had never seen Ohtani react this strongly in recent seasons. That observation carries weight. When a player of his temperament responds the way he did, it communicates something important. Ohtani clearly did not believe the pitch was an accident. His body language and his direct stare at the pitcher told the story of a man who felt he had been deliberately targeted. The reaction was not limited to Ohtani alone. The Dodgers dugout stormed out immediately following the hit by pitch. Mookie Betts, Andy Pages, and multiple teammates moved aggressively toward the field, pointing directly at the mound. The energy was explosive. Players from both teams began approaching the foul line, and what followed was one of the most tense near-brawl situations of the season. The home plate umpire was forced to step in to prevent the situation from escalating into an all-out confrontation. Order was eventually restored, but the atmosphere inside the stadium remained charged for the remainder of the inning. Those in attendance and those watching on broadcast described it as one of the most tense moments of the 2024 MLB season to that point. The fact that multiple Dodgers reacted with such immediate force tells its own story. This was not a team that brushed the incident off as a pitcher losing control of a pitch. This was a team that believed their franchise player had been targeted. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts made no effort to conceal his anger after the game. His post-game comments were direct, pointed, and designed to put pressure on the league to act. Roberts publicly stated, "We do not accept any behavior that could endanger players, especially when there are signs of intent." He continued, "Ohtani plays the game with complete dedication. Seeing him targeted in such a dangerous way is unacceptable." Roberts formally requested that both the umpiring crew and MLB review the incident and issue appropriate discipline. This was not a manager venting frustration to reporters and moving on. This was a calculated public demand for accountability directed squarely at the league office. The significance of Roberts making this kind of statement publicly cannot be understated. Managers are measured in their public comments. They rarely make outright calls for discipline against opposing players unless they believe the situation is serious enough to warrant league-level attention. By speaking out this strongly, Roberts sent a message. The Dodgers were not going to let this incident pass quietly, and they expected MLB to take it seriously. To understand why this hit by pitch generated a response far greater than most, it is essential to understand what Shohei Ohtani represents both to the Dodgers and to Major League Baseball as an institution. Ohtani is a two-way player. He hits, he pitches. Any injury to his hand or his arm does not just affect one dimension of his game, it affects both. A hand injury severe enough to limit his grip strength could compromise his ability to swing the bat effectively. That same injury could, depending on severity, affect his mechanics on the mound. No other player in MLB carries that kind of dual vulnerability, because no other player in MLB performs both roles at the elite level that Ohtani does. The timing made the situation even more alarming. Ohtani was scheduled to pitch the following day. A hit by pitch on the back of the throwing hand the night before a scheduled start is not just a regular HBP situation. It is a direct threat to a pitching appearance. Baseball analysts who weighed in on the incident were unambiguous in their assessments. A hit by pitch targeting the hand of a two-way star could derail an entire season. Former MLB players also spoke out to condemn the pitch, reinforcing the idea that even within a sport where brushback pitches have long been a part of the culture, this one crossed a line. The fact that it struck the back of Ohtani's right hand, his throwing hand, made it impossible to dismiss as an unfortunate accident without scrutiny. Within hours of the game, social media was flooded with responses. Thousands of posts called it a dirty pitch. Hashtags related to the incident trended on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. Fans shared images of Ohtani clutching his hand after the ball made contact, and the images spread rapidly across platforms. The sports media landscape divided into two camps almost immediately. One side argued that the pitch was a changeup that simply got away from Freeland under the pressure of a high-leverage situation, a pitcher losing command, nothing more. The other side argued that Freeland had deliberately targeted Ohtani to disrupt the Dodgers' rhythm at a critical point in the game, and that the location of the pitch, directly onto the back of the hand of a player scheduled to pitch the next day, was too specific to be dismissed as coincidence. The debate opened a broader conversation about old-school baseball culture versus modern player safety standards. For decades, inside pitches and even intentional hit by pitches have been treated as part of the unwritten rules of the game, a way to send a message, establish territory, or disrupt a hot hitter. But analysts argued loudly that MLB must do more to protect its biggest stars. In a modern game where franchises invest hundreds of millions of dollars in players like Ohtani, and where the global audience for the sport is closely tied to the health and performance of its marquee names, the old-school tolerance for potentially injurious inside pitches is no longer acceptable. Ohtani is not just a player. He is a global ambassador for the sport. His $700 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers, the largest in the history of professional sports at the time it was signed, reflects his standing. Every decision involving his health is made under a global microscope, and the league's response to threats to that health is watched just as closely. Despite the pain of being struck on the hand, Ohtani reached base via the hit by pitch and remained in the game. What followed demonstrated both his physical toughness and the quality of the Dodgers lineup around him. Andy Pages came through with an RBI double, and Ohtani sprinted home from second base to score. His running speed during that sequence provided some reassurance to fans watching closely for signs of how seriously he had been hurt. A player unable to run at full capacity would not sprint home on a double. The fact that Ohtani did exactly that suggested the immediate impact, while painful, had not incapacitated him. His presence on the base paths, fully committed to scoring, was a reflection of the professionalism that defines him. Regardless of what had just happened to him at the plate, Ohtani was still doing his job. In the fifth inning, Ohtani did not return to bat. Dalton Rushing came in as his pinch hitter, and the baseball world immediately took notice. Anytime a player of Ohtani's stature exits a game early, concern spreads rapidly. The media reaction, however, was cautiously optimistic. Sports Illustrated's Noah cameras suggested the move was precautionary rather than a response to a serious injury. Dodgers Nation echoed that sentiment across social media. Two specific details supported the more optimistic read of the situation. First, Ohtani had been wearing thick protective padding on the back of his right hand, which would have reduced the force of the impact compared to an unprotected hand. Second, and perhaps most importantly from a game management perspective, the Dodgers were leading 10-1 at the time of his removal. There was no competitive reason to keep their franchise player on the field with that kind of cushion in the score. No official injury update was released by the Dodgers following the game, leaving the exact status of Ohtani's hand uncertain. That uncertainty only added to the anxiety surrounding the incident. Ohtani was not the only Dodger to exit the game early. Kike Hernandez also left the contest with hip discomfort suffered while running the bases. The Dodgers became increasingly cautious about managing their key players once the game was firmly in hand. The pattern pointed to a team actively managing a roster full of high-value players in the middle of a demanding season. Protecting those players once the outcome was no longer in doubt is sound management. But the fact that both Ohtani and Hernandez exited the same game with physical concerns added a layer of unease to what should have been a straightforward victory. The Dodgers won the game convincingly, defeating the Rockies by a final score of 15-6. The result was dominant across the board, and in terms of the standings, it was another step forward for a team built to compete at the highest level. But the final score was almost secondary to the conversation the game generated. The incident involving Ohtani was bigger than one game. It was a test of MLB's commitment to player safety. Kyle Freeland's pitch, whether intentional or not, struck the throwing hand of a two-way superstar on the eve of a scheduled pitching start, prompted a near brawl, drew a formal complaint from a manager demanding discipline, and set social media on fire within hours. The league's response, or lack thereof, to Dave Roberts' public demand for punishment would send a signal not just about this incident, but about how MLB prioritizes the safety of its players going forward. When the most marketable player in the sport is put at risk in a situation that raises credible questions of intent, the league cannot afford to respond with silence or minimal action. Every decision involving Shohei Ohtani is made under a global microscope. MLB had an opportunity in the aftermath of this incident to demonstrate that the safety of its players, particularly its two-way generational talents, would be protected with the seriousness the situation demands.